The thing about palace gardens is that nobody talks about who actually tends them. Everyone photographs the roses, the perfectly edged gravel paths, the hedgerows clipped so sharp they look like someone ran a ruler along every leaf. Tourists stop, they point, they hold their phones up and go quiet for a second, in the way people go quiet when something is more beautiful in person than they expected. Nobody asks who got here at 5 in the morning. Nobody asks whose knees are dirty. I know this because my father's knees were dirty every single morning of my childhood. 31 years he worked in the gardens at Sandringham, head groundskeeper for the last 11 of those. He knew every root system, every drainage problem, and every corner of that estate that photographed beautifully and secretly fell apart twice a year when the frost came in wrong. He retired in March. In April, I went back for the first time since his leaving due, not because I had any particular business there. I live in Norwich now, teach secondary school geography, own a slightly unwell cat named Gerald, but because my mum asked me to collect the last of his tools from the groundskeeper's shed, and because I needed to see the place without him in it, to understand it as a place rather than just as the backdrop to my entire childhood. I didn't expect anything to happen, obviously. The staff entrance at Sandringham sits off a service road that most people never see. No tourists, no coaches, no men selling commemorative tea towels. Just a low gate, a security hut, and a gravel path that crunches in a particular way I've been hearing since I was 4 years old. The security officer on shift knew my name from my dad, waved me through without much fuss, pointed me toward the maintenance yard, told me to sign out before I left. It was a Thursday. Late April, which in Norfolk can mean almost anything. This particular Thursday had chosen to be unseasonably warm, pale sunshine that felt tentative, like it wasn't sure it had permission yet. The grounds were busy in the background way that estates are busy. Distant machinery, a van backing somewhere, the sound of someone raking that you feel more than hear. I found the shed, got the tools, a soil knife my dad's had since the 80s, a hand dibber with his initials scratched into the handle, a coil of wire he would have claimed was still perfectly usable, and which I was going to throw away the moment I got home. Loaded them into a canvas bag, stood in the doorway of the shed for a moment and just breathed. Old wood, linseed oil, the particular mineral smell of dried earth. 31 years. I was walking back through the kitchen garden, the old walled section that doesn't photograph well because the walls are slightly subsided on the north side, which my father used to call the palace's best-kept secret that nobody bothered to keep, when I heard footsteps on the gravel behind me. Light ones. Fast. The footsteps of someone who hasn't yet learned to walk at a socially responsible pace. I turned. A girl. 9, maybe 10, that hard-to-place age where children are simultaneously ancient and very small, a dark hair escaping from 2 uneven plaits, muddy boots, the green Wellington kind, and a blue anorak with what appeared to be a chocolate stain on the left cuff that someone had attempted to address and failed. She was carrying a trowel, not in a casual way, in the purposeful, slightly territorial way of someone who considers a trowel to be a serious instrument and wants you to know it. She stopped when she saw me, assessed me the way children assess strangers, fully, directly, without the adult instinct to pretend you're not doing it. "Are you collecting Mr. Alderton's things?" she said. I blinked. "I'm his daughter, yeah." "I know." She tilted her head. "He told me you'd probably come. He said you'd stand in the doorway of the shed for a while." I stared at her. She shrugged. "He said you always stand in doorways before you leave places. He said it's your version of saying goodbye." "I want to stop here and tell you something. My father is not a sentimental man. He was raised by a Yorkshire farmer who considered the display of feeling to be roughly as useful as a hose pipe in February. My dad shows love through practical action. He fixes things, builds things, plants things. He does not, as a rule, share observations about his daughter's emotional habits with strangers. let alone with children, let alone with this particular child, whose muddy Wellingtons I was slowly realizing I probably should have recognized. "What's your name?" I asked. "Charlotte," she said, and then, and with the particular tone of someone who has learned that their name sometimes requires context, "You can just call me Charlotte." I called her Charlotte. She walked with me back toward the main path, uninvited but entirely comfortable about it, trowel swinging at her side. And she told me, in the slightly too fast delivery of children who have a lot to say and have learned not to wait to be asked, that my father had taught her to propagate sweet peas. "He said most people skip the soaking step," she said. "They soak the seeds overnight in water, except he said you should actually scratch the coat first, the seed coat, and then soak them because they germinate faster. He said most of the books get it wrong and he stopped arguing about it years ago." I laughed before I could stop myself. "Yeah," I said. That sounds exactly like him. He also said you used to help him in the garden when you were my age and then you stopped wanting to because gardening wasn't cool anymore." I felt my face do something complicated. "He told you that?" "He told me a lot of things," Charlotte said simply. "I asked a lot of questions." We reached the point where the service path diverges, right toward the maintenance yard and the gate, left toward the formal gardens. She stopped where the gravel met the grass. "He was the only person here," she said, "who never treated the garden like it was for looking at." I waited. "Everyone else, they care about how it looks from the outside, for photographs and visits and what people will say." She dug the toe of one Wellington into the gravel, a small, restless gesture. He used to say the most important part of any garden is underground, where nobody's looking." She said it matter-of-factly, not performing wisdom, just reporting something she'd been told and had held on to. I looked at this child, muddy boots, lopsided plaits, chocolate-stained sleeve, standing at the edge of a garden that had been in my family's working life for 31 years without ever belonging to us. Not in the way it belonged to her, not in the way places belong to people by birthright and continuity and the sheer inherited weight of everything that came before. And I thought about my father, his dirty knees, his soil knife with the initials scratched in. The way he used to say, when I was small and didn't understand why he cared so much about a place that wasn't his, "It doesn't have to be yours to be worth taking care of." I thought I understood that when he said it. Standing here, I understood it differently. The most important part is underground, where nobody's looking. I would have left. I genuinely would have. The tools were in the bag. The form was signed. Gerald was at home being unwell, and my drive back to Norwich was 2 hours minimum, depending on the A47's daily decision about whether it wanted to function as a road or a car park. I would have left, except Charlotte said, "He left something for you in the potting shed. He said you wouldn't come back for it on purpose, so he made me the keeper of it." I turned around slowly. He made you the what?" "The keeper." She looked entirely unbothered by this arrangement. "He said if I ever saw you here, I was to make sure you got it. He said, and I'm quoting exactly—" She shifted her trowel to her other hand in a way that suggested she was about to do a vocal impression. "She'll try to be sensible about it and leave it behind, and she needs to not do that." The Yorkshire farmer's ghost running through the bloodline unchanged. "What is it?" I asked. "Notebooks," Charlotte said. "Come on." The potting shed is different from the tool shed, smaller, warmer even when empty, the shelves still lined with terracotta pots in graduated sizes that my dad arranged by the diameter measured in his handspan. He never used metric for pots. I've said it was the one place imperial measurement made actual sense because hands don't lie and pots don't care. Charlotte went directly to the third shelf from the bottom, the low one, the one at her height, and reached behind a row of 6-inch pots to a flat canvas package wrapped in the kind of brown paper you use for parcels. She handed it to me with a ceremony that felt small and genuine. Inside, 4 notebooks, moleskin, black, the kind that cost too much but last 30 years, which is exactly the kind of purchase my father makes because he does the maths on durability and refuses to apologize for it. I opened the first one. His handwriting, dense and slightly left-tilting, the handwriting of a man who was never going to be mistaken for someone who enjoyed handwriting. Sandringham Kitchen Garden, Season Notes, Volume 1. He started March 1993. 31 years of the garden. What was planted, what failed, what the frost did, what the drainage did, what worked against every piece of received wisdom, and what should have worked and didn't. Notes on specific trees. Their ages, their temperaments, the ones that needed talking to and the ones that preferred being left alone. And then, tucked inside Volume 3, a folded note in his handwriting. For Ellie, in case you forgot what I told you when you were 8 years old, and what I should have said better. The garden remembers even when we don't. Come back when you can. These are yours now. I stood in the potting shed with the afternoon light coming through a window that needed cleaning, and I absolutely did not cry. I nearly did. But Gerald needed feeding, and I had papers to mark, and I come from Yorkshire farming stock myself on my mother's side, so, nearly. Charlotte had followed me in. She was perched on the low potting bench, watching me read with the same unfiltered attention she'd used earlier. Not invasive, just present. He read me some of it, she said. The notes, when we were working. Did he? The bits about what went wrong, mostly. He said the failures are the most useful part. They're just the part everyone pretends didn't happen. She paused. He said most gardens only show you the year's best photo and throw away all the evidence of everything else. I looked up from the notebook. He talks about gardens, I said, but he's usually not talking about gardens. Charlotte tilted her head. What do you mean? He does that. Uses the garden to say the thing he can't say directly. I looked back at the page. It took me about 25 years to work that out. She was quiet for a moment. Then, he told me something he said he'd never told anyone who worked here. I waited. There's a section of the orchard, the old part, the part they don't use for the photographs, where 3 of the trees are dying. Have been for 4 years. He's been managing it quietly, not making it a crisis, not putting it in any official report because he said if it went into a report it would become a project, and a project would become a budget, and a budget would mean outside contractors, and outside contractors would, she paused, recalling the exact phrasing, do in 6 months what patients would fix in 2 years. I almost smiled. Yeah. He said the trees aren't dying because anything's wrong with them. They're dying because they're old, and old things need to be let to be old without everyone panicking about it. She looked down at her trowel. He said that's the secret about this place that nobody inside it is allowed to say. That some things are just old, and old is okay. I sat down on the bench next to her. Outside, somewhere in the formal garden, I could hear a lawnmower starting up. The particular warm engine smell of cut grass drifting through the cracked window frame. How long have you been coming to see him? I asked. Since I was 7. She said it easily, like it was obvious. I used to come with a grown-up the first few times, and then I just started coming by myself. He never made it a big thing. He'd just say, hand me that dibber, and we'd get on with it. Hand me that dibber. I heard my father's voice in that sentence so completely and so suddenly that I had to look away for a second. He never mentioned you to me, I said, in any phone call, any visit. He mentioned me? He didn't. That's what I'm saying. He never said a word. Charlotte considered this. He's private, she said, about things that matter to him. 31 years, dirty knees, the soil knife with the initials. Yeah, I said. He is. She hopped off the bench and straightened her anorak in the way of someone preparing to leave. The trowel, somehow, had found its way into her pocket. She stopped at the shed door. "He said you'd try to leave the notebooks behind," she said. "He said to tell you not to be an idiot." I looked down at the canvas package in my hands. Did he actually say idiot? "He said, don't be daft," Charlotte corrected with complete seriousness. "I softened it slightly." She left. I heard her Wellingtons on the gravel, quick and purposeful, fading toward the formal garden. I sat in the potting shed for another 10 minutes. Then I put the notebooks in the bag with the soil knife and the dibber and the wire that I was going to throw away, and I walked back to the car. I called my father that evening from my kitchen in Norwich. Gerald was on my feet. The notebooks were on the table. I'd made tea and let it go cold twice, which is what I do when I'm thinking about something hard enough that the tea becomes irrelevant. He answered on the 4th ring the way he always answers, without hello, just his name, like he's confirming his own existence. "It's me," I said. Thought it might be." A pause, the particular background sound of his house, the radio at low volume, always Radio 4, always a program he's not really listening to, but finds companionable. "You went." I went. "Get the notebooks?" "Got the notebooks." "Good." A sound I recognized as him settling into his chair. "She find you all right?" "She found me." I wrapped my hands around the cold mug. "Dad, how long has she been visiting you?" "I told you." "Since she was about—" "You didn't tell me, not once, in 3 years of phone calls." He was quiet for a moment, not the uncomfortable quiet of someone caught out, the considering quiet of someone deciding how much of the true answer to give. "She asks about the work," he said finally, "not about the position of it, not about any of the pomp and circumstance and whatnot. Just about what grows and why, and what dies, and what you do about it. First time she came, I think someone had brought her, shown her the beds. She just crouched down next to where I was working and asked me what I was doing." "What were you doing?" "Thinning seedlings. Painful job. Feels wrong. But you have to do it or nothing survives." He paused. "She watched me do about a dozen. Then she said, 'That's sad.' I said, 'It is, a bit.' She thought about it, and then she said, 'But necessary?' I said, 'Always.' And that was the first one." I turned this over. "She's been asking about the dying orchard trees," I said. "She has. You told her you've been managing it quietly, off the record." A short pause. "I told her some things." "Dad." "She was going to see them herself eventually. I bet her she hears it in plain language from someone who isn't performing about it." His voice had the flat, clear quality it gets when he's saying something he's thought about a lot. "She's going to spend her whole life surrounded by people who are performing. Every interaction managed. Every difficulty translated into something palatable. Every dying tree turned into a press release about renewal and heritage and the commitment to conservation." He exhaled. "I just talked to her straight, about what old things need, about what you don't fix, because fixing it would only be for the people watching." The lawnmower sound from the afternoon came back to me. The cracked window, the terracotta pots in his handspan measurements. "She said the most important part of any garden is underground," I said. She said you told her that." "I did." "Were you talking about gardens?" Silence. Then, so brief I almost missed it, something that might have been a laugh, not my father's usual sound, which is percussive and occasional, but something quieter, almost private. "Ellie," he said, "I was always talking about gardens." I read the notebooks over the following week, all 4 of them, cover to cover, which I don't think was strictly necessary, but which I couldn't stop doing once I started. The handwriting got more compressed in the later volumes, the way handwriting does when someone knows exactly what they want to say and just needs to get it down. The observations got sharper, less about method and more about principle. Volume 4, the last one, had a section at the back titled Things I Should Have Put in a Report and Didn't. I sat with that section for a long time. It wasn't scandalous. I want to be clear about that because I know what you might be expecting. No hidden rooms, no buried treasure, no dark institutional secret. It was, honestly, more devastating than that. It was 31 years of small truths. The drainage problems he fixed himself because the report process would have taken 18 months. The rose bed that needed resting for a full season but got replanted because an event was scheduled. The apple varieties in the old orchard that aren't being propagated anywhere anymore. 4 varieties specific to that estate, not documented in any national registry. That will be gone when the trees go because nobody is growing the next generation. 4 apple varieties. No one keeping them, just him. Knowing. Writing it down. Waiting for someone to ask. I emailed a horticultural archivist I know from a conference. She got back to me in 4 hours, which tells you everything about how she feels about rare apple varieties. We're going back in the summer to take cuttings from the 3 dying trees before they're too far gone. My father is coming with us. He said, and I quote this exactly because I wrote it down immediately, about bloody time. I've thought a lot about what to make of that afternoon. The muddy Wellingtons, the trowel, the notebooks wrapped in brown paper behind the 6-inch pots. The secret Charlotte revealed wasn't really a secret. It was never hidden from anyone who cared to look. My father wasn't keeping it for leverage or drama or the pleasure of knowing something others didn't. He was keeping it the way gardeners keep things. Quietly, underground, in the dark, waiting for the right conditions. The right conditions turned out to be a 9-year-old in an anorak who asked the right question without knowing it was important, who crouched next to a man with 31 years of dirty knees and said, "That's sad, but necessary?" And he said, "Always." She paid attention. She kept paying attention. She came back. That is, when I think about it, when I sit in my kitchen in Norwich with Gerald on my feet and the notebooks on the table. That is the most radical thing a person in her position could do. Pay attention. Keep coming back. Ask what nobody else thought to ask. Some things are underground because they're buried. Some things are underground because that's where they grow. The difference is whether anyone bothers to look. She bothered. The sweet peas came up in June. I'd started them from seed in March, my father's method. Scratch the code.